So let's talk about J.K. Rowling and her mullering of Alastair Campbell and Grace Campbell. And as with any online spat, it's a little bit hard to detect where things started. But certainly there are two videos that I think are at the centre of this. One of them is one that you tweeted, James. You tweeted a clip of Alastair Campbell and Rory Stewart pontificating, talking absolute rubbish about the Supreme Court judgment. She retweeted that, and then not long after, Grace Campbell, Alastair Campbell's comedian daughter, was a clip resurfaced of her talking with a trans activist, and both of them are saying that the women outside the Supreme Court celebrating their win, the recognition of biological sex in law, were ugly. They have horrible clothes, and imagine how disgusting their pubic hair is. Um, James, I mean, first of all, this is, I mean, as disgusting as it is, this is kind of what we come to expect from the people on that side of the argument.
They haven't changed. As I've said many times, and I'm not saying all trans people, obviously, but the trans radical activists are unequivocally some of the worst people on the planet. This is what they exist to do. They haven't. Yes, it still goes back to the fact that they haven't read the essay. They're still engaged in the game of Chinese whispers, and this hate has formed in their heart. And you don't have to know anything about her. They hate, and they can't explain why they hate. If she tweets something in support, they're against it. If they tweet everything, it's just to be opposed. And what people don't realize when they say that J.K. Rowling's tone is perhaps a bit severe and cruel. Well, I'll tell you something. After reading, spending a lot of the part since the last 12 years that I've been on social media, and since she made the comment about dress as you please, reading some of the comments that have been directed her are some of the worst things I've ever read, and they continue to be so. So when somebody gets personal with you, like let's mention an India Willoughby, for example, who has got very personal with her, and if JK snaps back, everyone suddenly goes, that was so unfair, that tone was awful, and you have to say, no, you've got to go back and you've got to look at the reason why. You don't go up and poke a bear with a stick until it wakes up and then complain when it bites you back. She's got a perfect right to stand up for herself. She is made it very clear, very, very clear, that she supports people's right to live as they choose, do what they choose, and think. But there's a line in the sand. Women's rights were fought for long, and not quite there, but they got their entitlements. But when did it suddenly be okay for men to say, no, sorry, actually we'll forget about all that, I feel this, therefore I'm entitled to that? That's all she's ever said. And because she was one of the biggest people to say that, she paid I guess what it must have been a personal price, because they went after her children, things like that, and look what they did to Graham Linehan, etc., etc. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And of course, the more they lose, the more they're going to escalate.
Absolutely. And one thing I think that J.K. Rowling has really hit the nail on the head on, certainly in some of her recent tweets, is saying that this movement is not only misogynistic but also classist. It's working class women in particular who are most affected by this idea that men should be able to barge their way into any changing room, any rape crisis center, etc., etc. What do you make of that angle, James? I mean, it is. It's all well and good for the sort of Hollywood elites or the Islington elites or whatever.
You've just got to imagine, one of your relatives or someone that who's been told by her doctor, something 3 times a week, go and have a swim, and she's in her sort of early 80s, and she's going along, and or you think about your nieces or your daughter and something going to swimming. I mean, are you telling me that the average person who goes to do that, they're the most affected? It's not really about going into luxury health centers and this, that. It is it is, the ordinary working class people of this country that will suffer most of this, because a lot of them aren't online like a lot of us are online. A lot of them still buy a newspaper like we all do, but there are many sort of elderly people, my age and up, who do not use the internet. And if you actually, I've explained this, what I've been involved in for the past 12 years, to some people of my age, and they go, "Really?" I swear to God. And you think, well, of course you wouldn't know. This whole thing is being fought online and in the courts. And the papers won't tell the truth. The papers still write, oh, she murdered him with an axe. And you think, that's not a she, that's a he. So they contributed to this muddying of the waters. So I think she's absolutely right. I mean, and it is, and if they manage to turn it, people suddenly go around and go, "Hang on a minute, why is he that man showering next to my daughter?" And they go, "Sorry, it's law now," and it'll have been too late, because I think it's trying to be like they did in Ireland, try to sneak it in under the back door. I think it's terrible, terrible.
No, I just think with J.K. Rowling, the fury that's directed towards her is such disproportion to what it is that she's ever actually said. The tragedy is that has still become the kind of received wisdom, that she has become some kind of hate monger. You see various celebrities, periodically gesture to the fact, isn't it such a terrible shame that this is what has happened to the legacy of the woman who wrote Harry Potter. And it's the sort of thing, and I think you make a really good point, James, which is to say part of the fury is that she is kind of uncancelable, that because she is so wealthy and established, that they can't really exact that price from her in the way that they can with other gender critical women. That kind of infuriates them even more to a certain extent. But at the same time, there's been a tremendous cost to reputation, totally unearned, a personal cost. Constantly being bombarded with death and rape threats is not fun. Activists showing up outside of her house, taking pictures of the house. All of this stuff is very, very serious. And just the extent to which your name has been dragged through the mud for saying something so eminently reasonable, and because of the fact that most people are not necessarily going to go and read that very carefully, very compassionately argued essay. They're just going to take what they hear from people like the Rest is Politics, who claim to pronounce objectively and clearly on matters of policy and politics, that there is something wrong there. So it's a tremendous shame, even though she has written it out and shown tremendous courage, and I think that really reflects well on her. And you can only hope that there will be some kind of more full rehabilitation of her amongst the cultural set at some point. It's still such a tragedy that she's had to go through this, I guess.
I agree. I went to see Ricky Gervais the other night, testing, his new material, and he came. He said something very interesting. He said, they tried to cancel me before. They tried to cancel me, but now they don't. They sort of leave me alone, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, he's right. They do leave him alone. Every so often, someone will say, Ricky, or whatever. And he said he'll focus on that very much. But it's very interesting that Ricky has said much more outrageous things about it. Okay, under the guise of being, comedy. But it's interesting that he's a man and she's a woman that's worked her way up from nothing, from having nothing, from a terrible abusive relationship. Because it is, I think it's essentially boils down to, let's hate the successful woman who won't roll over. And it's the oldest misogyny in the world. And of course, you get anonymous people behind a typewriter. I mean, you're going to see it. And that's why these people are the worst, because there are no depths that they won't sink to. I mean, some of the things that I've read, I've never read things like that before. And I've got a whole stack here of horror novels from the 70s. I've never read violence like it against her, but it's an irrational, and that's what she's had to deal with, and that must take a toll. And the fact that she's rich, so what? She earned it.